the other crisis is this question that we were talking about this morning. I go to visit schools where people have said to me, you'll love this school. You'll find the kind of kindergarten you're talking about. And I go to the school, and what intrigues me is not that it's not the kindergarten, that the person who heard me speak thinks it is. And so that the realization that it's very hard for this generation to even know what I'm talking about. I mean, so they haven't got a picture in their mind of what I'm talking about that makes them realize that the kindergartens they're describing, which are humane, nice teachers who speak in nice voices to children. But it's not a question of whether they may be right that, in their opinion, that that's a good classroom, and they might, but that I don't know how to communicate.
Or they don't know how to hear it. I mean,
well, but I don't know how to say it, so they could hear it. So an example was I was just was at some university, and I gave a talk about play, and I described, and I mentioned in passing that I can't, there are no blocks in kindergartens anymore, not even in pre-kindergartens. I mentioned some other things too, but I happened to mention blocks. So a woman came up to me at the end and said, come with me tomorrow morning, because the school I'm teaching you'll love. And I said, so maybe I will, maybe I won't, I said, but I'd love to visit. And she said, you'll see blocks. So I go to the school and I visit the room that she told me I would see blocks in, and I look all around, I can't see any blocks. And as we're leaving the room, then the teacher was doing a lesson on rhyming. The kids were obviously extremely restless, but it was some phonic game on rhyming. And as I'm leaving the room, I said to her, where are the blocks? She said, you were sitting on them. So there was this bench, not a very big bench, about this big, which apparently lifts up, and inside are some blocks. Well, I don't know when they're used, because I looked at the schedule and I didn't see any time where I could, any time for even free play or something where I could picture they were used. And also, the size of this case did not suggest to me that the number of blocks in it were very many, and clearly they weren't allowed to be kept up, so that you did something with the blocks, and then at the end of the 15 minutes, you put them back in. So I thought she was so happy with my presentation. I mean, we really bonded, this teacher and I. And but it was scary to me. There was nothing else. There wasn't a living plant in the room, or anywhere in the school there was a plant, or an animal that was a live animal. There was virtually no children's art. There were some things where children color in. There was a lot of teacher writing about the writing process, or a lot of directions on how to do things, and then examples. Sometimes there was children's work simply as examples of what the teacher's chart was, and tons of words around the room. And this was kindergarten. And I couldn't, so I said, oh, it's lovely, it's a lovely school. I can see why you love it. I didn't know what else to say, because, in fact, her relationship with the kids, this particular woman, were marvelous. It was obvious that the kids had extraordinarily good feelings about her, and that she felt it back. But I was just feeling inadequate. There's a fight in Congress right now. I mean, there's going to be, about early childhood education, and one of the issues that's going to come up is that they are going to demand testing. And I feel in pre-kindergarten and Head Start, and I'm convinced Obama that that's a kind of compromise in order to get through his early childhood plan will be 4. And I'm thinking, how do I feel about that? And what kind of campaign can we do now, since it's not yet up for voting? Is there any way we could build a movement now that will make it hard for him to fight to do this? It seems to me that our picture of being powerful teachers is having autonomy rather than being a member of a community in which our voice is powerful.
Where do you think that pressure's coming from, Deb?
I think it's the tradition of teaching, is that you close the door and this is your
That's it.
kingdom,
Yeah.
rather than that there's a community of teachers who are
Idea sharing.
who are a powerful community, and while to some degree they each practice in their own room differently, they shape practice collectively. And I don't think we have a tradition of that. And that is what we're asking children to do inside the classroom, is to create a collective environment in which we learn from each other and from the oldest and most experienced person in the room we call a teacher. So why don't we reproduce that professionally?
I don't think the learning community is beyond the theoretical point. And I think that there are powers that stifle that by design, because their administration or politics is afraid of that. You know, they pit teacher against teacher. The whole merit pay, that's what he was talking about this morning, what Bill was saying this morning, the what did he call it, the metaphor, is that you're lazy. Well, I don't want to be lazy. I don't want to be considered whatever. I need to set myself above, you know, and now you're saying that I'm going to be receiving compensation based on my performance, despite anything else, but nobody tells me what that performance standard is going to be.
I think individual people can sometimes act to help create that culture. It's a culture.
But I think to stress this question, that the disagreement has to be resolved is also a risk. Some disagreements aren't resolved, that's okay. That is okay. That's the nature of democracy, is the assumption that
Once in a while, when you
that's
vote, somebody loses and somebody wins.
and it's not the end of the world. So we disagree about whether it's human nature that's competitive or not, but we might never resolve that question between us, but there are times we will have to tackle it in a concrete way, and we may still disagree. So I think there is a kind of climate in schools that is a little different than some parts, in which being nice to each other is a higher goal than getting the work done. No, I don't want to knock it, but we're not very critical of each other. And we are, I think, more than in most professions, nervous about creating a climate in which disagreement is expressed strongly and passionately and is not quickly resolved. And I don't know, it's been this, I'd say, a central part of my own work has been trying to figure that out, and I haven't figured it out. It isn't a question. People used to say to me, well, if the faculty really trusts each other and likes each other, then they'll be able to be critical. And that's not true. The more they like each other, the more they want to protect each other. For example, you said something that I disagreed with, and I thought, oh, well, I'll talk to you about it afterwards. So why do I hold back that comment?
And what's interesting about that was I was noticing how you were very challenging, and I've seen you do that before, and I really admire it. And it's surprising to hear you say, I haven't figured it out. That you held back, yes. But I think it's essential. I think this peace over progress thing that we have in education, whether it's when I was teaching high school or now at the university where it's even worse, this desire, it's like, I know this is a really bad thing that he did, but he's such a nice guy, and I don't want to, and terrible things happen to children because we're so passive with one another. Part of it's fear, but part of it is, I think there's a tremendous empathy in people who decide to go into teaching anyway, and that sort of spills over then into their working with each other. You know, they want to sort of encourage each other forward.
And that's partly why we and then end up closing the door and practicing in privacy.
Yeah,
because then we don't have to have the disagreement. No one will know what I'm doing. So our empowerment is behind the closed door. What I call arguing and you call conflict.
Debate.
And they're called debates.
Since they're at the heart of democracy. If we all agreed with each other and could reach consensus, we wouldn't need a democratic system. So,
Hold it.
so the question is, whatever that word is, how do we celebrate it and practice it in schools if the adults, my claim is if the adults don't know how to practice it among themselves? How can we help young people? It's like, how can kids learn to play soccer if they've never seen the game played? If kids have never been in the company of adults? And I think you're right, most kids think argument is when mother and father look like they're about to get divorced.
Right.
And so argument is scary.
That's what I told the kids one time recently. I said, you don't see what I see.
But that sometimes is, and that's in some ways, that attitude on our part is in some ways behind the standardized testing. Because if they say, outsiders can say, if you don't really have a professional culture in which you can develop your own standards because you're afraid to clash with each other, then we'll invent some standard. And I think we need to build a professional standards within at least within our own schools. I'm not talking about nationwide, so that a school can discuss what is good teaching.